Let's dive into the latest episode of Star-Crossed Souls. I want you to picture uh, a quiet, darkened room, and right in the center, there's just a single spotlight illuminating a chessboard.
Right, but the pieces aren't traditional, knights or rooks.
Exactly. They are these profound concepts: thermodynamics, ancient linguistics, structural engineering, maritime chemistry. We're essentially sitting down to analyze a match between two grandmasters of intellect.
It really is a space that demands absolute intellectual rigor. Welcome to the analytical space of Volume 1, Tone 1, Phrase 3.
The Night Breeze of Ōmihachiman.
That's the one. Today, we're exploring this profoundly charged interaction between our protagonists, Kaho and Kai. And we must be crystal clear from the outset here. These are not conventional romantic leads.
No, not at all.
They are opposing, yet intrinsically complementary intellectual forces.
Yeah, let's establish their parameters for anyone just stepping into the archive with us. So Kaho, and that's pronounced Kaho, she operates as a publisher. She's the priestess of the water goddess.
And she harbors that deep memory of the figure known as Aurelia, pronounced Aurelia.
Right, and her analytical lens is grounded entirely in the humanities. She decodes history, textiles, ancient esoteric archives. She views the world through these meticulous threads of cultural memory.
Encountering her across the board is Kai. He's this half-Welsh, half-Japanese astrophotographer. But crucially for our analysis today, he's a former master plasterer.
Which is such a specific and important detail.
It really is. Where Kahu reads the archives of humanity, Kai reads the physical universe. His whole framework is built on material science, structural engineering, optics.
He understands the world through, the physical resistance of materials and the behavior of light.
Precisely. And what happens when those two lenses focus on the exact same coordinate in space and time is just fascinating.
It really is. So we begin in a microenvironment. They are in Ōmihachiman, which is this historic castle town. They're sitting in a converted traditional Fumi merchant's townhouse.
And the defining architectural feature of this space is a Hira-niwa.
A flat garden.
Right. A flat garden framed by a lattice painted in Bengara.
Which is ferric oxide, right, like an iron-based red pigment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that architectural space, it isn't just a pretty backdrop. It serves as the foundational metaphor for the entire chapter's philosophy.
So Kahu is sitting there. She's looking out at this Hira-niwa in the twilight, and she makes this really critical historical observation.
Yeah, she contrasts this flawlessly flat Shumi garden with the traditional Kamakura Zen gardens of Kyoto.
Because in Kyoto, the aesthetic relies heavily on mukuri.
Yes, mukuri. Artificial elevations, manufactured hills, carefully curated stones. Those Kyoto gardens are meticulously crafted to manufacture this profound mystique. They simulate, deep mountains and secluded valleys within a really confined space.
I want to look at the geometry of that for a second, because when you build a garden with mukuri, you're essentially engineering an illusion.
You really are.
You're using topography to dictate exactly where the viewer's eye should go.
Exactly. They're designed to dictate the landscape to the viewer. And if we look at the philosophical axes of gardens globally, how humans engineer nature tells you everything about their worldview.
Oh, absolutely.
Take the classic, almost violent dichotomy we see in Western garden design. Consider the French formal garden. Versailles is the ultimate example.
Pure Cartesian logic.
Completely. It's the purest expression of human reason. Nature is entirely subjugated. Trees are forced into these perfect, unnatural geometric grids. Water is coerced into symmetrical pools.
It's a display of absolute monarchical and mathematical dominance over the chaos of the earth. Geometry weaponized to prove human superiority.
Precisely. And then, on the opposite end of the Western spectrum, you have the English landscape garden, pioneered by people like Capability Brown.
Right.
This style pursues an idealized, untamed, romanticized vision of scenic beauty. But it's entirely deceptive.
Because it requires massive engineering to look natural.
Exactly. Massive earth moving just to hide the hand of the designer, all to make it look naturally perfect.
But the Japanese garden operates on an entirely different dimensional axis altogether.
It does. Its origins trace back to ancient Chinese Shengxian philosophy, the pursuit of the realm of immortals. You see this monumental, vertical aesthetic reflected in places like Westlake in Hangzhou, China.
With the towering topography.
Right, breathtaking pavilions. But as the timeline shifts forward, the Japanese garden integrates a profound Buddhist cosmology. In Shiga Prefecture specifically, the aesthetics of the tea ceremony intersected intensely with true Pure Land Buddhism. The gardens became philosophical constructs.
But Kaho points out that the Umi merchants looked at that deep, elevated engineering of Kyoto and just entirely flattened it.
They completely rejected the mukuri.
Yeah, they built horizontal gardens born purely from extreme empirical pragmatism. I mean, a merchant's garden had to be walked across effortlessly, had to be swept easily.
It was built for the functional needs of townspeople.
Exactly, moving back and forth from the main house. It's an aesthetic born from unpretentious utility. Kaho even notes that a Kyoto gardener would likely look at this flat space and find it bland, because it lacks those artificial undulations.
But I love how Kai pushes back on that hypothetical assessment using hard material science.
Oh, it's brilliant. If you have ever tried to smooth out drywall in your house, or even just perfectly ice a cake, you know exactly what Kai means here.
Right.
Because from a strict structural engineering and thermodynamic perspective, achieving absolute perfect flatness is mathematically and mechanically far more difficult than building elevation.
How so? Like structurally.
Think about the geometry. If you build a hill in a garden or put a striking asymmetrical branch on a mound, you manufacture a focal point. You give the eye a place to rest.
Which means you give the eye places to ignore.
Exactly. You can hide a multitude of structural flaws. Uneven soil grading, poor planting right behind a hill. It provides camouflage. But absolute flatness is like zero gravity.
Nowhere to hide.
Nowhere to hide. There's no artificial focal point to distract you. Every single square inch of the surface is under equal, relentless scrutiny.
And Kai explains this perfectly through his past as a plasterer. He notes it takes a minimum of 5 grueling years just to learn the baseline technique of finishing a wall perfectly flat.
Just the baseline.
Yeah, and then another 10 years of relentless discipline to, as his master put it, coax out the true character of the earth.
Let's analyze the thermodynamics of mud for a second, because what Kai is describing is a masterclass in fluid dynamics.
I was hoping we'd get into the physics of this.
Yeah, he quotes his old master saying, "You don't just plaster it, you caress it." Now, that sounds poetic, maybe a bit mystical, but it's actually a strict mechanical directive. Plaster or mud is a non-Newtonian fluid.
Okay, meaning what?
It exhibits shear thinning properties. When you're plastering a surface, if you apply brute kinetic force, like if you press down hard with your trowel, the viscosity of the mud actually drops. You separate the water from the aggregate.
You're compressing the material unevenly.
Exactly. And what happens to the wall?
It dries dead and brittle.
Yes.
Yeah.
You've crushed the microscopic pockets of air out of the matrix, and those air pockets are critical. They give the wall its thermal insulation, its acoustic warmth. If you compress it, you destroy its life.
So the craftsman has to operate with, like, intense thermodynamic sensitivity.
Right. Kai describes gently resting a hand upon a delicate, breathing layer of air. He's literally feeling the thermal exchange through the steel of his trowel. He's sensing the evaporation rate of the moisture, managing the surface tension of the water in real time.
That is incredible precision.
Just 1 millimeter of excess pressure, 1 microfluctuation in the angle of the blade, and you create a ridge. The entire horizontal plane is ruined. It requires a flawless alignment of biomechanical vectors.
And what's so compelling about this exchange is that Kaho doesn't just, nod along. She instantly recognizes this exact same structural truth within her own domain.
The humanities perfectly aligning with the hard sciences.
Exactly. She draws a direct parallel to the master silk weavers she studies.
The physics of a loom are incredibly unforgiving. But how does she connect silk to plaster?
Because the master weavers hold an identical standard regarding the elimination of excess. Kaho notes their foundational philosophy plain, unpatterned fabric is the most unforgiving of all.
Oh, because a pattern acts as camouflage.
Right. If you have a complex brocade, like a vivid pattern of dragons or geometric shapes, you can easily hide a drop stitch. You can camouflage a slight variance in the tension of the loom. The pattern distracts the eye, functioning exactly like that artificial hill in the Kyoto garden.
The focal point draws you away from the flaw.
Yes. But pure, unpatterned white silk. It's the textile equivalent of the Hira-niwa, or the flat plaster wall. It is absolutely unforgiving. Every single intersection of the warp and the weft has to be mathematically perfect.
Right, because if the tension applied by the weaver's hands fluctuates by even a fraction, the fabric will bunch.
And because it's pure white silk, the light reflects off those uneven microscopic ridges differently, exposing the flaw instantly to anyone looking at it.
So the ultimate aesthetic, whether you're manipulating wet earth with a steel trowel or silk threads on a wooden loom, is the absolute elimination of excess.
It is a shared philosophy of zero friction. And we see this conceptual structural alignment manifest physically as they eat dinner.
Yeah, let's talk about the dinner scene. They're sitting there looking out over the Hira-niwa. They're eating Lake Biwa freshwater fish, perfectly seared himi beef with this delicate shiso and dashi sauce.
And the junsai.
The junsai, right. Water shield. It's an aquatic plant covered in a naturally occurring mucilage that allows it to slide down the throat with zero friction. I really want to highlight the physiological sync here.
The text is very deliberate in noting how flawlessly their palates and paces align.
Yes, their metabolic alignment is entirely low friction. They naturally reach for their food in tandem. Their eyes meet effortlessly to acknowledge the complex flavors. Despite having spent the entire day locked in this intense intellectual chess match, their physical rhythm in that space is seamlessly aligned.
There's no wasted kinetic energy between them.
None. It creates an atmosphere of profound equilibrium.
Which perfectly sets the stage for a massive conceptual pivot, because they are sitting in this flawlessly horizontal microenvironment, and Kai takes that concept of horizontality and scales it up.
He scales it up to analyze the macro architecture of Japanese history itself.
Right. He looks out toward the ruins of Oda Nobunaga's Azuchi Castle. Nobunaga was the great military unifier of Japan, and his castle was this towering, dominant structure, the first of its kind. Kai identifies this architectural choice as a symbol of vertical power.
Deeply influenced by ancient Chinese reverence for verticality.
Exactly. The emperor reaching toward the heavens, the tower dominating the landscape, declaring absolute authority over the earth below.
Yeah, Kai juxtaposes that verticality with the Umi merchants, who put down roots in that very same soil right at the base of the castle.
The merchants wholly rejected the vertical tower. They reveled in the horizontal gardens as a seamless, pragmatic extension of their daily lives.
So Kai observes that the twin pillars of Japanese culture, the vertical authority from ancient China intersecting with the horizontal empirical pragmatism of the Japanese, perfectly intersect right there in the geography of Shumi.
It's a breathtaking spatial analysis of history. And this realization of the power of the horizontal serves as the natural bridge into the second major phase of their interaction.
Because once Kaho and Kai master the concept of the flat earth, the Hira-niwa, they immediately shift their focus to the ultimate flat surface on this planet.
The ocean.
Right. If we're going to talk about horizontal movement, we have to talk about the Funaki clan, also known historically as the seafaring Amabe clan. Kaho starts extrapolating this concept of horizontal movement from local water transport in Lake Biwa to the massive scale of ancient global trade.
She points to the Funaki ruins on Awaji Island. For context, Awaji Island holds immense mythological significance. In the Shinto creation myth, it's the very first island created by the gods.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, and Kaho points out that the sacred megalith at these specific ruins aligns perfectly with the solar ley line. This is the path of the sun, a geographical and astronomical alignment that the great Buddhist monk Kukai deeply respected.
No, I have to play the skeptic here, just as Kai initially does. An astronomical alignment is fascinating, but it doesn't automatically equal a global maritime empire.
Right, this big jump.
Yeah, you can't just base a massive historical leap on a solar ley line. What is the physical mechanism linking these local ruins to a global stage?
Well, Kaho argues that this level of astronomical precision proves they weren't just local shipwrights building wooden boats to ferry rice across the lake. A site aligned with such mathematical precision indicates an observatory.
So it was designed for charting stars and reading atmospheric shifts?
Exactly. They were ancient, high-level maritime navigators.
Okay, if we are talking about ancient global navigation, we have to talk about harnessing the planetary conveyor belt. In antiquity, you didn't have diesel engines. You were entirely at the mercy of atmospheric pressure differentials. Kaho is suggesting they're riding the monsoons, crossing all the way from the Eurasian continent to East Asia.
Precisely. They were using the summer winds to carry spices and bronze artifacts from Eurasia into East Asia, and the winter winds to return with silk and porcelain.
Let's break down the sheer atmospheric physics of the monsoon cycle because it is essentially the Earth breathing, and it all comes down to specific heat capacity.
Which is the amount of heat required to change the temperature of a substance, right?
Right. Water has a much higher specific heat capacity than rock or soil, meaning it takes a massive amount of energy to heat up the ocean, and it takes a long time for it to cool down. The ocean basically acts as a giant thermal battery.
While the landmass of Eurasia acts very differently.
Exactly. In the summer, the massive Asian continent bakes. The rock and the soil heat up rapidly. And as that land heats up, the air above it expands and rises, creating a massive low-pressure vacuum.
Oh, I see.
The cooler, heavier, moisture-laden air over the Indian Ocean and the South China Sea, which is a high-pressure zone, rushes in to fill that vacuum. That is the summer monsoon. It is a literal planetary-scale wind tunnel blowing straight toward Asia.
And then, in the winter, the physics entirely reverse.
Yes. The land loses its heat rapidly and freezes, creating a dense, high-pressure system of cold, dry air over the continent. The ocean, acting as that thermal battery, is now warmer than the land.
So the low-pressure vacuum is now over the water.
Exactly. So the wind blows from the continent back out to sea. The seafarers would ride this exact reverse current back to their home ports. It was a massive, predictable atmospheric engine.
But reading that engine was a matter of life and death. If you miscalculate the seasonal shift, or if you lose your bearing and drift off the optimal current, you could end up trapped in the equatorial doldrums.
And for a sailing vessel in antiquity, hitting the doldrums was a nautical code blue. The doldrums are a low-pressure area around the equator where the trade winds collide and cancel each other out.
The prevailing winds simply die.
They die. And without wind, a horizontal vessel doesn't move. You sit in the blistering heat, drifting aimlessly until your fresh water runs out and your crew dies of dehydration. You cannot just guess your way across the ocean. You need an absolute fixed coordinate.
Which is why their mastery of stellar navigation had to be flawless. Kaho shares a staggering astronomical data point regarding this ancient seafaring people. She quotes the ancient Greek philosopher Thales of Miletus.
What did he say?
He marveled at their terrifying precision. Thales noted that while the Greeks navigated by the Great Bear Ursa Major, these mysterious master navigators steered by the Little Bear, Ursa Minor.
To understand why abandoning the Great Bear for the Little Bear is a massive technological leap, we have to look at orbital mechanics.
Because the Great Bear is prominent, right?
It is. It's incredibly bright, easy to find. But because of the Earth's rotation, the Great Bear sweeps a very wide circle across the night sky. Navigating by it gives you a general, localized sense of direction. It's an approximation.
But an approximation will get you killed on the open ocean.
Exactly. But the Little Bear, Ursa Minor, the North Star, Polaris, sits right at the very tip of its tail. And because Polaris is aligned almost perfectly with the Earth's axis of rotation, it barely moves in the night sky.
It doesn't sweep a wide circle.
No, it's pinned in place. It is a fixed, absolute mathematical coordinate. By locking their navigation onto Ursa Minor, these ancient seafarers were drawing a direct, terrifyingly precise vector to the celestial North Pole.
It allowed them to navigate the deep, open ocean, far out of sight of land, with surgical, repeatable accuracy.
That is mathematically staggering.
The Greeks were so utterly awestruck by this capability that they eventually named the constellation Ursa Minor specifically after them, out of sheer reverence.
And this brings us to the explosive core of Kaho's revelation.
Who were these master navigators? Kaho theorizes that the Funaki ruins on Awaji Island were built by the forerunners of the Funaki clan, who were, in fact, descendants of the Phoenician star.
The Phoenicians. That is an enormous historical claim.
It really is. For anyone unfamiliar with the ancient Mediterranean, the Phoenicians were the absolute, undisputed powerhouse of the ancient maritime world.
Predating the Romans and the Greeks.
Long before the Roman Empire, long before the Greeks reached their zenith, they were Canaanites operating out of the Levant, modern-day Lebanon and Syria. They were the business partners of Israel's first king, King Solomon.
Wow.
They completely dominated the Mediterranean and the Red Sea. They mastered advanced metallurgy. They invented the alphabet we use today. And they were the greatest shipbuilders of antiquity.
But hold on. Let's look at the data. You are telling me a localized Japanese boat-building clan on Lake Biwa just happens to be the ancient Phoenicians.
That's the theory.
You're linking the Mediterranean Sea to central Japan based on a shared appreciation for the North Star. I need physical proof. How does a Phoenician end up being called a Funaki?
This is where Kaho and Kai execute a brilliant deconstruction of the biomechanics of linguistics. They don't just rely on words sounding vaguely similar in a poetic sense.
Right.
They trace the physical, biological mutation of the human vocal tract over centuries. Kaho explains that the Romans referred to the Phoenicians as Punicus. Think of the Punic Wars between Rome and Carthage, which was a major Phoenician colony.
Okay.
She traces how the Latin word punicus biologically mutates as it enters the Japanese linguistic sphere.
Okay, let's break down the phonology here because human speech is fundamentally an exercise in pneumatics and biomechanics. In ancient Japanese, the P sound is what linguists call a voiceless bilabial plosive.
Right.
To make a P sound, try it right now. You have to tightly seal your lips, which are your bilabials. You have to build up air pressure in your lungs and behind your lips, and then release it in a sudden, violent burst. A plosion.
It requires significant kinetic energy.
It does. Think of the hard P sound like a sprinter exploding off the starting blocks. It takes massive, concentrated energy. But as language evolves organically over centuries, human beings naturally seek the path of least mechanical resistance.
Languages get tired.
Exactly. They stop sprinting and start jogging. The voiceless bilabial plosive P naturally decays or relaxes into a bilabial fricative, the F sound.
Oh, we see.
Instead of a hard, pressurized burst of air, you simply allow the air to flow continuously through slightly parted lips. The mechanical tension in the face completely relaxes. So organically, the Pu in Punicus loses its pressure and shifts to Fu.
And what happens to the structural syntax of the rest of the word?
Well, Japanese syntax is strictly syllabic, so it generally requires a vowel to follow a consonant. The vocal tract in Japanese cannot easily accommodate an isolated, hard consonant terminating a syllable.
So the isolated C in Punicus
Is completely unpronounceable in that framework, and it simply drops out entirely. Furthermore, the vowel I often mutates to the more relaxed open vowel A in compound forms.
Let's run the algorithm then.
Let's do it. Punicus drops the C, the P softens to an F through relaxed pneumatic pressure, and the vowels shift. Punicus becomes Funaki.
What makes this scene so compelling is that Kai, representing the hard sciences, doesn't just nod and accept this historical theory. He immediately validates the physical mechanics of it using his own Welsh heritage.
Yes, I love this connection. He brings up the Ōmihachiman.
The traditional Welsh male voice choirs.
Right. He explains that in Wales, aspirated plosives are pronounced with immense, forceful breath. These choirs didn't originate in conservatories. They evolved directly from the rhythmic, grueling work songs of coal miners and iron workers.
It's a very physical sound.
Very physical. Kai recalls a friend drilling him on Welsh pronunciation in a pub in Conwy. His friend told him, "Your pronunciation is just skimming off the back of your throat. Bring it up from the gut. Go and practice your vocal exercises in front of a candle flame."
It's a perfect physical illustration of the generation of sound. A true aspirated plosive requires intense diaphragmatic pressure from the gut to force the air out with enough velocity to physically blow out a candle flame.
It cannot be lazily skimmed off the larynx.
Right. Kai intrinsically understands the physical labor required to maintain a hard P sound. It perfectly explains why it would naturally, biologically relax into an F sound when adopted by a different culture over a millennium.
And they don't stop at consonants. They move to the mathematical symmetry of vowel mutations. Kaho notes that in archaic Japanese, the word for I was mi, but when it mutates into a compound word like eyeball, it becomes manako.
The I mutates into an A.
Yes. And Kai immediately counters with the exact mathematical inverse from Wales.
Right, the singular Welsh word for I is ligade, but in the plural form it becomes ligade.
The A mutates into an I. It is a breathtaking scientific synchronicity. You have two completely isolated island nations, separated by the massive expanse of the Eurasian continent, demonstrating identical mirrored phonological behaviors.
The physical properties of human language, how the vocal cords vibrate, how the jaw relaxes, are behaving like immutable laws of physics across the globe.
This biological and linguistic bridge solidifies Kaho's theory. The Funaki were the Punicus. They were the Phoenicians.
But Kaho takes it a step further. In Tang Dynasty China, which heavily influenced ancient Japan, if you didn't have a surname written in Chinese characters, you were considered a barbarian, an outsider, essentially a slave.
So they needed a written identity.
Yes. So Kaho theorizes that these naturalized seafarers took the phonetic sound of Punicus, which preserved their true ancestral roots, and matched it with Japanese kanji that represented their actual physical profession.
They chose the characters for boat, funa, and wood, ki funaki.
Kai finds this deeply amusing. He likens it to a modern Brazilian footballer naturalizing in Japan and choosing phonetic kanji for his jersey that secretly conceal a double meaning about his hometown in São Paulo.
It's a cryptographic identity. They hid their ancient origins in plain sight. But if they were building boats and they were the master shipwrights of the ancient world, what kind of boats were they building?
Kaho cites the Nihon Shoki, the ancient Chronicles of Japan, as one of the oldest historical records in existence. In the chapters detailing the age of the gods, there is a divine declaration to let cedar and camphor be your floating treasures.
And she connects this directly to the Phoenicians.
Right. Their vessels in the Mediterranean were constructed from the legendary Lebanese cedar, wood that was incredibly straight, highly buoyant, and resistant to rot. When they arrived in Japan, they sought out the exact same material properties.
They found Japanese cedar and used it to build the Marukobuni ships on Lake Biwa.
The structural design of the Marukobune is an engineering marvel.
It really is. It's a perfect hybrid of techniques. They used massive camphor wood, which grows incredibly thick and dense, and hollowed it out to form a sturdy dugout canoe base. That provided immense stability.
And then the cedar.
Then they used the straight-grained, lightweight cedar to build up the timber-framed sides, increasing cargo capacity without sacrificing speed. It was an advanced shipbuilding manual brought directly from the Mediterranean and adapted to local materials.
But navigating the sea route from the Mediterranean to Japan requires far more than just well-engineered wood. It requires survival logistics on a massive chemical scale.
Absolutely.
Kaho points out a profound historical dichotomy regarding global trade routes. The people who traveled the Silk Road by land were warriors, nomads, and cultivators. They required iron to forge swords and arrows for offense, and plows for the earth.
But the sea route is a completely different hostile environment. You aren't fighting enemy armies on horseback, you are fighting the biology of the ocean itself.
Voyages lasted years.
Yes, and the greatest enemy to a wooden ship carrying heavy cargo isn't a pirate's sword. It is a tiny marine bivalve mollusk known as the shipworm, Teredo nivalis.
It is an evolutionary nightmare for a wooden vessel.
It really is. The shipworm isn't actually a worm, it's a clam that evolved into a drill. It has microscopic ridges on its shell that it uses to physically rasp away at the wood.
And it eats the wood.
Right. It doesn't just bore holes for shelter. It relies on symbiotic nitrogen-fixing bacteria in its gills to digest the cellulose. A colony of shipworms will silently bore into the wooden hull of a ship below the waterline, entirely honeycombing the structure from the inside out.
Until the hull just disintegrates beneath you in the open ocean.
Exactly. You need a defense mechanism.
And Kai, drawing on his practical material science knowledge of minerals, instantly identifies the chemical solution Kaho is leading toward. He identifies their defense.
Yes. Mercury sulfide, cinnabar.
Today we know mercury is highly toxic. Its use is heavily regulated or banned entirely.
Exactly. It's a deadly heavy metal neurotoxin. But for these ancient mariners, that extreme toxicity was its greatest asset. When cinnabar is crushed and applied to the hull of a ship, mercury sulfide acts as the ultimate natural anti-fouling paint.
Because it's insoluble.
Right. Mercury sulfide is incredibly insoluble in water, making it a perfect, long-lasting barrier. When the microscopic larvae of the shipworm or barnacles try to attach to the hull, the mercury ions bind to the sulfhydryl groups of their proteins.
So it kills them instantly.
It instantly denatures the enzymes of the marine life, killing them before they can begin to bore into the wood. It is an impenetrable chemical shield.
Kai synthesizes the paradigm instantly. Land routes required iron for offense, but the ocean required mercury for defense. Mercury was the ultimate survival technology of a seafaring people.
It's a brilliant synthesis of history and chemistry, but it raises a final, crucial question. The Phoenicians mastered stellar navigation. They mastered the fluid dynamics of the wind. They mastered the chemical defense of their ships.
How did they signal this immense wealth, this absolute technological dominance, to the rest of the world?
Which brings us to the third and undoubtedly the most intense section of their analysis. The macro-historical data they have been throwing back and forth is about to collapse into a hyper-localized, highly charged interaction between Kaho and Kai in that private dining room.
And the catalyst for this reaction is the electromagnetic frequency of color. Kaho reveals the ultimate symbol of the Phoenician industrial monopoly, Tyrian purple.
Let's talk about the chemistry and economics of Tyrian purple. This wasn't just a dye you could mix from local berries. It was the ancient world's most fiercely guarded intellectual property.
It was extracted from the hypobranchial gland of the Balanus brandaris sea snail.
Right. And the sheer scale of production was horrifying. It took tens of thousands of rotting snails processed in massive putrid vats to produce just a few grams of this dye.
And the biochemistry involved was highly advanced.
It was a complex photooxidation process. The extract from the snail actually starts out as a yellowish, milky precursor. To get the purple, they had to expose the dyed fabric to direct sunlight.
Wait, the sun didn't fade it?
No, the ultraviolet radiation from the sun literally broke the chemical bonds of the precursor molecule, forcing the bromine-heavy compounds to restructure and permanently fuse with the fabric fibers. It created debromoinigo.
So the UV radiation activated it.
Activated it, exactly. And because it was chemically bonded to the fiber, it never washed out. In fact, as it weathered, it actually grew brighter and more vibrant.
Because of the astronomical labor, the stench of the production, and the raw materials required, Tyrian purple was mind-bogglingly expensive. It was worth vastly more than its weight in gold.
Which is why it was restricted.
Right, by sumptuary laws. Only royalty, only emperors were permitted to wear it. It was the absolute color of power.
And Kaho points out the etymological root of the entire civilization. The ancient Greek word phoenix literally means Tyrian purple.
That is where the Greeks got the name for the people, the Phoenicians. They were, quite literally, the purple people.
She even playfully directs Kai's attention to the logo on his own shirt. He's wearing a Nike shirt featuring a wave pattern and presumably a swoosh, which she connects conceptually to the immortal bird, the phoenix.
The word phoenix shares the exact same linguistic root phoenix. The mythical bird rising from the ashes was named for the reddish-purple hue of its feathers.
So let's look at the historical puzzle they've assembled. The Funaki clan, these descendants of the Phoenicians, settle near Lake Biwa. The local immigrant Hada clan weaves incredibly sturdy hemp for sails.
And the Phoenicians, utilizing their highly classified photochemical techniques, dye those massive sails with Tyrian purple.
And Kaho brings up the ultimate historical flex to prove the association between purple sails and absolute maritime dominance. Cleopatra.
Yes. When Cleopatra sailed her royal barge to meet Mark Antony in Greece, history records a specific detail that was meant to signify her staggering, almost incomprehensible wealth and power over the Mediterranean.
Her massive sails were dyed entirely with Tyrian purple.
And this specific historical data point is the catalyst. It triggers a massive behavioral shift in Kai. Up until this point, they have been sparring playfully, analyzing data from a comfortable, objective distance.
But suddenly, the tension in the room changes.
Kai sets his glass down. The text notes a knowing smirk. He rests his elbows on the table and physically leans into her space.
He drops the casual demeanor and shifts into an incredibly precise vocal cadence. He recites a flawless line from Shakespeare's Antony and Cleopatra. The sails were purple and so perfumed that the winds were lovesick with them.
It is a brilliant intellectual maneuver. He is taking her historical data and reflecting it back at her through the lens of high literature. Kaho notes the scent of bitter after-dinner coffee and wax oil in the air. Her senses are entirely heightened by this sudden shift.
But she manages to maintain her composure, right?
She does, replying that a color that makes the wind fall in love is a fitting legacy for the Phoenicians on this lake.
But Kai isn't finished. He connects this vast ancient maritime dominance directly, intimately to Kaho's own identity. The text specifically notes that he drops the defensive barrier of his photographer's lens. He locks his smoldering, smoky quartz eyes onto her.
He isolates her completely within his field of vision.
Let's view this interaction entirely through the physics of optics. When a photographer focuses a lens on a subject, they adjust the aperture to narrow the depth of field. By opening the aperture, the background physically blurs out. All peripheral data, all distractions are eliminated from the sensor.
Only the subject remains in absolute, razor-sharp focus.
Right. Kai is performing this exact optical isolation with his own physiological hardware. The ciliary muscles in his eyes are adjusting. He eliminates the room, he eliminates the Hira-niwa, he eliminates the macro history of the world.
He focuses entirely intensely on her.
And then he delivers the insight. He says, purple sails, eh? It's right there in your name, too. The sail ho that catches the winds of Eurasia.
Kaho's name contains the exact character, ho, meaning sail. He has just inextricably linked her very name to the legacy of the Phoenician star, to Cleopatra's royal barge, and to the monsoon winds of Eurasia that they just spent the evening deconstructing.
And Kaho's physiological response is instantaneous and entirely beyond her control. Her archivist defenses, her safe, objective, historical distance, it all vanishes.
She is struck to her core by this direct, piercing observation.
Her autonomic nervous system takes over. The parasympathetic nervous system reacts. Her capillaries dilate. Her face flushes instantly with blood. She is rendered entirely speechless, reduced to doing nothing but gripping her sake glass tightly to ground herself.
As they leave the eatery and step out into the cool night breeze of Ōmihachiman, the aftermath of this interaction is palpable. Kaho is walking along the Hachimanbori Canal, actively exposing her feverish face to the wind, her mind reeling from the intensity of the connection.
And we have to describe the resulting connection between them using only the terminology of physics, because what we are witnessing is not a mere exchange of historical pleasantries. It is undeniable quantum entanglement.
How does entanglement manifest in this specific physical space?
In quantum mechanics, when two particles become entangled, their physical states become intrinsically permanently linked. The state of one particle instantly dictates the state of the other, regardless of the distance or the barriers between them.
They no longer operate as independent, isolated entities.
Exactly. They operate as a single unified system governed by a shared wave function. As Kaho and Kai walk along the canal, surrounded by those traditional merchant houses painted with Bengara, that ferric oxide, the iron used not for weapons of war, but for the defense of the structures against the elements, they are no longer separate.
The text highlights that beautifully. It notes that the sound of their individual footsteps on the cobblestones begins to sync, resonating through the tranquil town as a single harmonious chord.
Exactly. That is harmonic resonance. The esoteric, humanities-driven knowledge of Kaho's historical archives and the pragmatic, hard science logic of Kai's material engineering have clicked together. They have formed a perfectly interlocking mechanism.
The gravitational pull they feel upon the calm surface of Lake Biwa isn't just an emotional reaction. It is a terrifyingly powerful magnetic resonance.
It has aligned their vectors, and it is pulling them inevitably toward the next chapter of space and time.
It is a stunning architectural construction of a narrative. To take the thermodynamic philosophy of a completely flat garden, weave it seamlessly through the biomechanics of ancient Mediterranean linguistics, grounded in the applied chemistry of shipbuilding, and utilize all of that massive data to forge a singular, undeniable moment of magnetic resonance between two distinct minds. It leaves me in a state of quiet, eager anticipation. I'm absolutely fascinated to see how this profound intellectual alignment will shift their trajectory in next Friday's update.
Letters by letter, volume by volume, this extraordinary duo is ready to lift the veil. The Chronos archive is now open. Let the great tuning begin. Star-crossed souls.